The signature that erased me from my own father's company was forged in blue ink on a Tuesday, 3 days before my 18th birthday. I know because I found the notary stamp receipt in the kitchen trash, tucked inside a coffee filter like it was something shameful. Maybe it was. My name is Marlo Prescott, and I was 17 years and 362 days old when my family decided I was too young to understand business. That was the exact phrase my Uncle Bennett used, standing in our living room in Asheville, North Carolina, wearing the same navy blazer he wore to my father's funeral 8 months earlier. Too young to understand business. He said it the way you would tell a child there is no more ice cream, gentle and firm and completely closed to argument. My father, Callum Prescott, built Prescott Precision Instruments out of a 2-car garage in 1998, the year before I was born. He started with one lathe, a used oscilloscope, and a contract to make custom sensor housings for a medical device company in Raleigh. By the time I was 10, he had 40 employees. By the time I was 15, he had 92, and a warehouse in Fletcher that smelled like machine oil and burnt coffee, and the sound of pneumatic drills was the lullaby of my childhood weekends. My father let me on the shop floor when I was 7. He gave me safety glasses that kept sliding down my nose and told the machinists to answer any question I asked, no matter how small. I asked a lot of questions. I asked why the tolerances on the aerospace parts were tighter than the medical ones. I asked why the newer CNC machines wasted more coolant than the older ones. I asked why the shipping department used 3 different software systems that did not talk to each other. He would laugh, big and warm, and tell me I was going to run the place one day. He died on a Sunday in October of 2024. Heart attack in his sleep. My mother, Denise, found him in the morning and screamed the sort of scream that lives inside the walls of a house forever. I heard it, and I ran, and I did not stop running in my head for weeks after. The company was left in a trust. I understood this because I had listened at doors my whole life. My father had built the trust structure with his attorney, Marvin Oslander, back in 2019, and the terms were simple. 40% to my mother, 20% each to my 2 older brothers, Grayson and Tate, and 20% to me, held in a custodial arrangement until I turned 18, at which point I would receive full voting rights and a seat on the board. 20%? It was not a controlling stake. It was not even close. But it was mine, and my father had put it in writing, and he had told me once, on a drive home from the plant when I was 14, that he wanted at least one of his children to actually love the work, not just love the money. I loved the work. My brothers loved the money. That was the whole story, right there in one sentence. Grayson was 27, an assistant sales manager at a car dealership in Charlotte, and he had never once set foot on the factory floor without complaining about the smell. Tate was 24, still figuring out what he wanted to do with his life, which mostly meant playing online poker and asking my mother for gas money. Neither of them had ever asked my father a question about the business. Not one. But the moment the will was read, they became experts. Suddenly Grayson knew about AITA. Suddenly Tate had opinions about market conditions. Suddenly my mother, who had spent 30 years telling my father he worked too much, was talking about her late husband's legacy and how it needed to be protected. Protected, that is the word they used, as if I were a threat. The buyer showed up in January of 2025. A private equity group out of Atlanta called Marnell Holdings. They had a portfolio of small manufacturing companies across the Southeast, and they were offering $18 million for Prescott Precision. Cash and stock. 60 days to close. I found out about the offer the way I found out about everything after my father died, by accident. I came home from school, and my mother was on the phone in the kitchen, and she did not hear me come in. She was talking to Bennett, her brother, who was somehow now the family spokesperson on all matters financial, despite having declared personal bankruptcy in 2016. I heard her ask, "But what about Marlo's share, though? Marvin said her signature is required for any sale before her birthday." I stopped in the hallway. I did not breathe. Bennett's voice came through the speaker, tinny and confident. "We handle it before her birthday. Denise, listen to me. She is 17. She is a minor. You are her legal guardian and the majority holder in her custodial trust. You have signature authority. Marvin knows this. I do not want her to feel, my mother began. She will not feel anything, Bennett cut in, because she will not know until it is done, and by then it will be $18 million split 4 ways and she will thank us. She wants to go to MIT, right? Her share pays for that 10 times over. This is a gift. Sign the papers. I stood in the hallway and felt the floor tilt. Not a metaphor. The actual floor. My knees went soft, and I put my hand on the wall to keep from falling, and the wall was cold, and I remember thinking, my father built this wall. He picked out this paint. He installed this baseboard on a Saturday in 2011, with me handing him nails. I walked upstairs without making a sound. I locked my bedroom door. I sat on the edge of my bed and I did not cry, which surprised me, because I had been crying about my father for 3 months and I thought I had unlimited tears. But this was different. This was not grief. This was the specific quiet feeling of being erased. 20% of $18 million was $3.6 million. That is what they thought they were taking from me, but they were wrong. They were not taking money. They were taking my father's promise. They were taking the last thing he had given me, the seat at the table where he had wanted me to sit. I opened my laptop. I did what I always did when the world felt too big. I opened the folder on my hard drive labeled with a random string of numbers, the folder no one in my family knew existed, and I looked at what I had been building for the last 2 years, in the corner of the R&D lab at Prescott Precision, on nights and weekends when everyone assumed I was just hanging around because I missed my dad. The project was called Aperture. It was a sensor array. Specifically, it was a miniaturized multispectral imaging module that could be integrated into standard industrial inspection lines to detect microfractures in machine parts at 40 times the resolution of what Prescott currently sold, at roughly 1/3 of the cost, using a proprietary algorithm I had written in Python and then rewritten in C++ after a summer online course I took when I was 16. I had built the prototype in the R&D lab using parts that had been written off as scrap. I had logged my hours as unpaid internship time. I had documented everything in a private lab notebook I kept in a locked drawer in the workbench my father had given me for my 12th birthday. The workbench was still there. The notebook was still there. The prototype, 3 iterations of it now, was still there, wrapped in anti-static foam inside a plain gray Pelican case I had labeled with a fake part number so no one would ever open it. Nobody at Prescott Precision knew what Aperture was, not the engineers, not the plant manager, not my mother, not Bennett, not the 2 men in Atlanta with their $18 million checkbook. Only my father had known, and he was gone. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a long time. And somewhere in that dark, I made a decision that would take me 137 days to execute, and 11 months after that to see paid off in a way none of them could ever have imagined. I was going to let them sell the company. And then I was going to walk out with the one thing they did not know existed. The morning after I overheard my mother in the kitchen, I did 3 things before I ate breakfast. First, I emailed Marvin Oslander from the encrypted account my father had set up for me when I was 15, back when he was starting to worry about what he called family dynamics. Second, I opened a spreadsheet and began cataloging every component, every line of code, every calibration file, and every scrap of paper that made up the Aperture project. Third, I called the one person outside my family who had ever taken me seriously as an engineer, my father's chief of R&D, a woman named Priya Ramaswamy. Priya was 41, sharp as glass, and had been hired by my father in 2016 to run the sensor development team. She had a doctorate from Georgia Tech and a habit of drinking hot tea even in August. My father trusted her more than he trusted his own brother, and after he died, she was the only person at the plant who still asked me how I was actually doing. She picked up on the second ring. "Marlo, are you all right?" "Priya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to promise you will not tell anyone I asked." There was a pause. I heard her set down her mug. "Ask." I told her, not all of it. I told her that my family was planning to sell the company before my 18th birthday, that they were going to sign my share away using my mother's guardianship authority, and that I had been building something in the R&D lab for 2 years that was not in any inventory system and not in any patent filing, and not in any conversation anyone had ever had with the buyer. There was a very long silence. "Callum knew about this project," she finally murmured. "Did he not?" "He knew I was working on something. He did not know how far I had got. I finished the third prototype in September. He died in October. I never showed him the final calibration data." "Oh, honey." I did not cry. I had promised myself I would not cry on this phone call, and I did not. "Priya is what I am doing legal, taking the prototype, taking the notebook, taking the code." She thought about it. I could hear her thinking. It sounded like tea being stirred. "You built it on your own time," she replied slowly. "You used scrap components that were written off the books. Your father signed you in as an unpaid intern, which means you were not a work-for-hire employee. There is no IP assignment agreement in your file, Marlo. I know because I audit the R&D files every January. You are not on any IP assignment. So it is mine. It is yours. Legally, ethically, morally, it is yours. And Marlo, listen to me very carefully. If this company is being sold, and if that invention is not disclosed to the buyer as part of the asset base, then whoever signs the sale is going to end up in a very uncomfortable position 11 months from now when the buyer figures out what is missing. Do you understand what I am telling you?" I did. I understood exactly what she was telling me. "Priya, if I take it, if I walk out, are you going to stop me?" "No," she whispered. "I am going to help you. Callum was my friend, and he would have wanted you to have every piece of what you built." I hung up the phone and I sat on my bed and I let myself have exactly 90 seconds of shaking. Then I stopped, and I got dressed, and I went downstairs, and I ate cereal across from my mother, who asked me about my calculus test, and I answered her about my calculus test, and I did not let a single thing in my face suggest that I had heard her the day before selling my future for $3.6 million. Marvin Oslander wrote back that evening. His email was short. "Marlo, come to my office Friday after school. Alone, tell no one, Marvin." Friday, I told my mother I had a study group. She did not even look up from her phone. She had been on her phone constantly since January, whispering and nodding, and taking notes on a legal pad that she hid in a drawer of her nightstand. I had checked. The notes were about tax implications and estate distributions, and a phrase she had underlined twice, minor beneficiary override. I drove to Marvin's office in the Volvo my father had bought me the summer before he died. It was a 2019 model, silver, with a dent in the rear bumper from where I had backed into a mailbox 2 weeks after I got my license. My father had laughed about the dent. He had said it gave the car character. He had never fixed it. Marvin's office was above a bakery on Merriman Avenue. He was 63, thin, with white hair he kept too long for a lawyer and reading glasses he wore on a chain around his neck. He had drafted my father's trust in 2019, and he had known my father since 1994, back when they had played in the same over-30 basketball league before Marvin blew out his knee. He hugged me when I walked in. He had not hugged me at the funeral. He had shaken my hand at the funeral because he had told me later he had not trusted himself to hug me without falling apart. "Sit down, kiddo, tell me what you know." I told him everything. The kitchen, Bennett, the sale price, the 60-day close, the signature plan. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Marlo, there is something you should know about your father's trust. Something I did not tell your mother, because your father specifically instructed me not to." My stomach clenched. "There is a clause. Section 14, subsection C, if any beneficiary attempts to alienate, sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of a company asset without the written consent of all trust beneficiaries who have reached the age of majority, the transaction can be legally challenged and, in most cases, unwound. Your father added that clause specifically because he was worried about your brothers. So they cannot sell it. They can sell it. Your mother has guardianship authority over your custodial share until you turn 18. She can sign on your behalf. That is legally valid. But, he held up a finger. If, after you turn 18, you discover that the sale was conducted in bad faith, if you discover that material assets were concealed, if you discover that the fiduciary duty owed to you as a beneficiary was violated in any way, then Section 14 subsection C activates, And you can sue, not just your family, the buyer too. I stared at him. Marvin, why are you telling me this? He put his glasses back on. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Because your father made me promise. He came to me in the summer of 2024, 3 months before he died. He told me he was worried about his heart. His father died at 58 and he was 57. He told me that if anything happened to him, he wanted me to look after you. Not the money. He told me that Grayson and Tate would try to push you out. He told me your mother would let them, because she had always let them, because she was afraid of them in a way she was not afraid of you. I could not breathe. He told me you were the only one who understood what he had built. And he told me that if the day ever came when the family tried to take it from you, I was to tell you exactly one thing. What? Marvin leaned forward across his desk. Do not fight them for the company, fight them for yourself. Take what is yours and build something bigger. I sat there and I felt something I had not felt since the morning my father died. I felt him in the room. I felt him sitting beside me on that couch in Marvin's office, with his big warm laugh and his safety glasses, and his hand on my shoulder saying, "That is my girl." I drove home in silence. I did not turn on the radio. I did not check my phone. I let the mountains blur past the windows, and I let the plan settle in my chest like a stone dropped into deep water. The sale would happen. I would let it happen. I would not warn the buyer. I would not tell my family what I knew. I would smile at the closing dinner. I would sign whatever consent form my mother put in front of me the moment after my 18th birthday, because Bennett would want that signature for cover, and I would give it to him because it did not matter. And on my graduation day, June 6, 2025, when the whole family was distracted with photos and cake and the illusion that they had won, I would drive to the plant one last time. I would open the workbench my father had given me. I would take the Pelican case and the notebook and the external drive that held every line of code, and I would walk out of Prescott Precision Instruments carrying the one thing that would eventually be worth more than $18 million. I would fight them, all right, but not for the company. I would fight them for the future my father had promised me. Between February and June of 2025, I lived 2 lives. In one life, I was Marlo Prescott, high school senior, top 5 in my class, accepted early to MIT for mechanical engineering with a partial merit scholarship. In that life, I went to prom in a green dress my mother picked out. I took the SAT one final time to bump my math score from 790 to 800, and I let my brothers ruffle my hair at the dinner table like I was a puppy. In the other life, I was cataloging everything. Every night after my mother went to bed, I opened my laptop and I built a record. Photographs of the prototype. Time-stamped commits of the code to a private repository. Scans of the lab notebook, page by page, uploaded to 3 separate cloud accounts under aliases. A signed and notarized affidavit from Priya, dated February 17th, confirming that the Aperture project had been developed by Marlo Prescott on personal time, using written-off components, without a work-for-hire agreement in place. A second affidavit from a retired machinist named Hollis Ford, 71, who had been my father's first employee, and who had watched me solder the first prototype board in the spring of 2023. Hollis signed his affidavit on a Saturday morning in his kitchen, while his wife made me pancakes. "You be careful with this, girl," he warned, sliding the paper across the table. "That family of yours does not know what they are letting go." "I am counting on that, Mr. Ford." He laughed and pushed the maple syrup toward me. The sale to Marnell Holdings moved forward on schedule. My mother signed the papers on March 11th. Bennett was there. My brothers were there. Marvin was there too, in his official capacity as trust counsel, and he did his job with a professional blankness that I understood was costing him something. He caught my eye once across the conference room, and I gave him the smallest nod. The wire transfer landed on March 14th. $18 million. Split 4 ways per the trust formula. $7.2 million to my mother. $3.6 each to Grayson and Tate. $3.6 into a custodial account with my name on it, which my mother controlled until June 6th. Grayson bought a Porsche within a week. A used one, but still. He drove it to Sunday dinner and made everyone come outside to look at it. My mother clapped her hands and said it was beautiful. Tate paid off his credit card debt and then, 2 weeks later, borrowed $5,000 from my mother to cover what he called a short-term liquidity issue. My mother started looking at condos in Florida. Nobody asked me what I wanted to do with my share. Not once. Bennett brought me a consent form on March 18th. He did it casually, at the kitchen table, after dinner, sliding a folder toward me like it was a permission slip for a school trip. Just a formality, honey. Your mom signed on your behalf because of the timing, but since the money is going into a custodial account for you anyway, we want to have you sign a retroactive consent for the file. Marnell asked for it. Belt and suspenders kind of thing. I looked at the form, I looked at Bennett. He was wearing that navy blazer again. He had lost weight since January. Selling a company must be aerobic exercise. Do I need to read it? You can if you want, but it is standard. Just says you are aware of the sale and you consent to the terms. Your mother had full authority. This is just cleanup. I read it anyway, slowly. I made him wait almost 15 minutes. I watched his jaw tighten by the minute. Then I picked up the pen and I signed it, and I dated it March 18th, 2025, and I slid the folder back to him. There you go, Uncle Bennett. That's my girl. I did not look at him when he said that. If I had looked at him, I might have hit him. At school, I told exactly one person what was happening. Her name was Sable Whitaker, my best friend since 5th grade, and she reacted the way I needed her to react, which was to sit very still on the floor of her bedroom and listen without interrupting, and then, at the end, ask me one question. What do you need me to do? Nothing yet, maybe later. I might need a witness. Whenever, whatever, say the word. Sable was the only person my age who knew what aperture was. I had shown her a demo in December, in her garage, using a broken control arm from her dad's Jeep. The sensor had picked up a hairline crack the naked eye could not see, mapped it in 3 dimensions on my laptop screen, and calculated the remaining fatigue life at approximately 11,300 cycles. Her father had looked at the screen for a full minute in silence, and then replaced the control arm the next morning. Marlo, he had murmured, you built this. Yes, sir. How old are you? 17. He had shaken his head and gone back inside to call his mechanic. That memory kept me going through March and April. The memory of Sable's dad's face. The memory of Holly's Ford pushing the syrup across the table. The memory of Priya's voice on the phone saying, "It is yours." The Marnell people started walking the plant in April. They brought consultants. They brought engineers. They walked through the R&D lab, and one of them, a man in his 50s with a beard, paused in front of my workbench in the corner. "What is this station used for?" he asked the plant manager. The plant manager, a good man named Dennis Yao who had worked for my father for 15 years, glanced at the bench and then at me. I was standing in the doorway. I had come by after school, ostensibly to pick up a book I had left in Priya's office. Actually, I had come to see if anyone was going to touch the workbench. That was Callum's daughter's bench, Dennis explained. Intern station. She built some school projects here, nothing production. Is it inventoried? No, personal use only, signed off by Callum. The bearded man nodded. He moved on. My heart did not start beating again until he was on the other side of the room. Dennis found me in the hallway a few minutes later. Marlo. Yes. That bench is still yours. Anything on it is still yours, you understand? I understand. Your father made me promise. Same day he made Priya promise. Same day he made Marvin promise. He knew, honey, he knew. I did not cry in the hallway of the plant. I saved my crying for the car. I sat in the Volvo in the parking lot for 20 minutes and I cried the way you cry when someone you love has been dead for 6 months and you have just realized they are still, in some small and impossible way, still trying to protect you. The sale closed on May 2nd, 2025. There was a dinner at a steakhouse in Asheville. My mother wore a new dress. Grayson made a toast to Dad. Tate got drunk and told a story about Dad that was not true, one where Dad had allegedly let him drive a forklift at 12. It never happened. Dad had never let Tate near a forklift. Tate had been afraid of the plant. But my mother laughed and dabbed her eyes and said, "Oh honey, he would be so proud." The Marnell people were there. 2 of them. The bearded man from R&D and a woman named Corrine Haveston, who was the deal partner, in her 40s, in a black suit, with the kind of watch that costs more than a used car. She sat across from me at the table, and she asked me polite questions about MIT and about my summer plans. I answered her politely. I did not look her in the eye for too long. I did not want her to see anything. At the end of dinner, she handed me her business card. "If you ever want to talk about engineering as a career path, Marlo, please reach out. Your father built something remarkable. I imagine that runs in the family." I took the card. I put it in my wallet. I did not know then that I would send her an email exactly 11 months and 2 weeks later, and that the email would begin with 3 words that would change everything. "You bought incomplete." Graduation was on a Friday, June 6, 2025. Reynolds High School, 247 graduates in blue polyester robes on a football field, and my family in the 3rd row of the visitor bleachers, waving at me every 30 seconds like I might forget they were there. I walked across the stage, I shook the principal's hand, I moved my tassel. The whole thing took 46 minutes. Afterward there were photographs. My mother wanted a picture with all 4 of us. Grayson, Tate, me, and her. She had a photographer, a friend from her book club, and she made us stand on the front steps of the school in the June heat while the photographer told us to say cheese, and everyone said cheese except me, who said the word cheese without smiling. Grayson noticed. "Come on, Marlo, it is graduation. Smile." I am smiling. "You look like someone stole your dog." "Nobody stole my dog, Grayson." He rolled his eyes. Tate laughed. My mother sighed and told the photographer to just take the picture. There was a party planned at the house that afternoon. Extended family, Bennett and his wife, some of my mother's book club, a handful of my friends. Catering from the barbecue place on Tunnel Road. A cake that said "Congratulations, Marlo" in blue icing. My mother had ordered it in advance. I told my mother I would meet her at the house in an hour. I had to go pick up my yearbook. It was a lie. I had already picked up my yearbook. It was in the trunk of the Volvo. She kissed me on the cheek and told me not to be late. Grayson slid a small blue box into my hand as I was walking away. Inside was a Tiffany bracelet. Silver, thin, with a heart charm. "Congrats, kiddo. Sorry I have been distant. Been a rough year for all of us." I looked at him, I looked at the bracelet, I looked back at him. "Thank you, Grayson." I put the bracelet on. I would take it off later. I would put it in a drawer and I would not look at it again for a very long time. But for the moment, I let him have his gesture because I did not need him to know anything. I drove to the plant. The parking lot was mostly empty. Fridays after 5, most of the shops shut down. There were a few cars in the front lot, evening shift and office people. I parked in the visitor spot. I had a badge. My father had got me a badge when I was 12 and nobody had ever taken it away. Priya had checked. The system still recognized it. She had made sure it would. I walked in through the side door. Dennis was in his office on the phone, and he lifted a hand in greeting without stopping his call. Priya was not there. Priya had taken the day off deliberately. She had told me she did not want to be a witness to what she called an entirely legal removal of personal property. The R&D lab was empty. The overhead lights were off. Only the small lamp on the workbench in the corner was lit. I had left it on that morning. I had come in briefly at 7 before graduation to prepare. The Pelican case was under the bench, inside a cabinet, behind a stack of old fixture drawings. The lab notebook was inside the top drawer, wrapped in a black cloth. The external drive was in a Mylar bag in a second drawer, taped to the underside of a plastic tray. I took them all. I put them in a canvas tote bag I had brought with me. The tote bag was from an MIT open house I had attended in April, and it said Massachusetts Institute of Technology in small maroon letters on the side. It felt appropriate. I paused before I left. I ran my hand across the top of the workbench. The wood was scarred and stained. There was a burn mark from a soldering iron I had dropped in 2023. There was a coffee ring from a mug my father had set down in 2021. I said something to the empty room, something quiet, something I will not write here because it was between me and him. Then I walked out. Dennis waved at me as I left. I waved back. In the parking lot, I put the tote bag in the passenger footwell, buckled it in with the seatbelt because I did not trust the road not to bounce, and I drove home. The party was already loud when I got there. Cars parked all the way down the street, music playing on the back deck. Someone laughing too loud in the front yard. I carried the tote bag inside. Nobody noticed. I walked up to my bedroom. I locked the door. I put the tote bag in the back of my closet, behind my winter coats, under a box of old textbooks. Then I changed my shirt and went downstairs, and let my mother introduce me to a neighbor I had known my whole life. Bennett cornered me by the punch bowl an hour later. He was holding a paper plate with brisket and coleslaw, and he was already on his second beer. So, MIT Boston, big city girl now. Boston is not that big, Uncle Bennett. You know what I mean? He took a sip. Listen, I want to say something, man to woman or whatever. I braced. I know the sale was hard. I know it happened fast. I want you to know, kiddo, that everything we did for the family. For you too, your dad, God rest him, he built something great, but that industry was changing. Marnell has the resources to take it to the next level. It was the right move, and you got your share, you got your future. I got my future. That is right. Thank you, Uncle Bennett. He smiled. He clinked his beer against my glass of iced tea. He turned and walked away toward Grayson, who was showing off the Porsche to a cousin from Greensboro. I stood there and I sipped my tea and I looked at the room. My mother by the back door, laughing, Tate on the couch scrolling on his phone. Grayson holding court in the driveway, Bennett with his beer, the house my father had built for us, the furniture he had picked out with my mother in 2008 when they had renovated. The photographs on the wall of birthdays and Christmases, and one specific picture of my father and me at the plant when I was 9. Both of us in safety glasses, both of us grinning. I looked at the picture for a long time. I looked at his face. He had known this day was coming. He had known I would have to walk out of the house he built carrying the only piece of him that mattered. He had made sure I could. At 9 that night, I went to bed early. I told my mother I was tired. She kissed my forehead and told me she loved me and told me not to be too sad because change was hard but life was long. I am not sad, Mom. Oh, honey, of course you are. No, Mom, I am really not. She looked at me for a moment. Something passed across her face. Confusion, maybe, or the very first flicker of a question she would not think to ask for another 11 months. Then she smiled and told me to sleep well, and she closed the door. And I sat on my bed in the dark and I listened to the party downstairs, and I thought about all the packing I still had to do before I left for Cambridge in August, and I thought about the Pelican case in the back of my closet, and I thought about the years ahead of me, and for the first time since my father died, I was not afraid. I was awake. I left for Cambridge on August 18th. My mother cried at the airport. Grayson had already gone back to Charlotte. Tate walked me to security with his hands in his pockets and told me to text him if I needed anything, which I understood to be a formality, since Tate had not texted me first in 3 years. I flew to Boston with 2 suitcases and a carry-on. The carry-on had the Pelican case in it, wrapped in socks and sweatshirts, cushioned so carefully that a TSA agent asked me at the checkpoint what was inside. A sensor prototype, personal engineering project, solid-state electronics, no batteries. He nodded and let me through. I had rehearsed the sentence for 6 weeks. MIT put me in a dorm on the west side of campus. My roommate was a girl from Seoul named Yeren Bae, who was studying computational biology and who owned 6 houseplants and 1 violin. We got along immediately, which was a relief. I did not have the emotional bandwidth to negotiate a difficult roommate on top of everything else. My freshman year plan was simple. Get to MIT, keep my grades up. Do not tell anyone about Aperture. Find a professor I trusted. Refine the prototype. File a provisional patent by the end of my 2nd semester. Then start looking for someone who actually understood the industrial inspection market. I did all of it. The professor I found was Dr. Elena Marchetti in the mechanical engineering department, who ran a lab focused on non-destructive testing. She was in her 50s, Italian by way of Buenos Aires and MIT, and she had published 47 papers on ultrasonic and optical inspection systems. I emailed her in September. asking if I could talk to her about a personal project. She wrote back in 3 lines, "Come to office hours Thursday. Bring the project, do not bring hype." I brought the Pelican case. I brought the notebook. I brought a laptop with the code. I set up in her office on a Thursday afternoon in October, and I ran a demo on a titanium bracket she pulled off her own desk. The demo took 11 minutes. When it was done, she was silent for almost a full minute. Then she took off her reading glasses and set them on the desk. "Miss Prescott, who else has seen this?" 3 people, my father who is deceased, his head of R&D, and my best friend from home. "Any commercial demonstrations?" 1, to a family friend, informal, no documentation on his end. "Any patents filed?" "No." "Any public disclosures, conferences, papers, social media?" "None." She sat back in her chair. She looked at me for a long moment. "Do you know what you have built?" "I have some idea, Professor." "Do you know what the market for this looks like?" Industrial inspection market is roughly $19 billion globally, growing about 6% a year. Aerospace, automotive, medical device, and energy are the biggest segments. Current standard inspection systems for microfracture detection at production line speed cost between $40,000 and $120,000 per unit. My module, at scale, could be produced for under $6,000. She stared at me. "You have done your homework." "My father taught me too." She nodded slowly. She put her glasses back on. "We are going to file a provisional patent this month. My lab will provide the resources. In exchange, you will present this work at a closed-door session at the Non-Destructive Testing Consortium in Cambridge in April. No press, no public disclosure. Just the right people in the right room. Do you understand what I am saying?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Miss Prescott?" "Yes." "Whatever happened to you before you got here? Whatever family situation put that look on your face when you walked in? I am not going to ask. But if you ever want to tell me, my door is open. And if anyone tries to take this from you again, they will have to go through me first. Is that understood?" I nodded. I could not speak. She handed me a tissue from a box on her desk without commenting on it, and she asked me if I wanted a coffee, and I said yes. And we walked to the little cafe in the engineering building, and she talked about the weather for 10 minutes while I got my face back together. By December, I had a provisional patent filed through MIT's Tech Transfer Office. My name was on it as sole inventor. The filing date was December 2nd, 2025, but the invention date documented in the filing was March of 2023, backed up by Priya's affidavit, Holly's affidavit, and the time-stamped code commits. The provisional would give me a full year to file the non-provisional utility patent, and it locked in my priority date. Professor Marchetti brought 2 colleagues into the loop under NDA. One was a patent attorney named Robert Klainsesser, who worked with the Tech Transfer Office. The other was a woman named Adiz Aquiosa, an entrepreneur in residence at the MIT Innovation Initiative, who had taken 3 sensor companies from lab to acquisition. Adiz looked at my work in January of 2026. She was 44, direct, and she wore leather boots that made a specific sound in the hallway that I came to associate with good news. "Marlo, I am going to tell you something, and you are not going to argue with me." "Okay." "You are going to finish your freshman year. You are going to keep your grades up. And in the summer, we are going to incorporate a company. I am going to invest the first $250,000. You are going to keep 65% equity. I am going to take 12%. The rest will go into an employee pool and a small allocation for Professor Marchetti as scientific advisor. Do you have any questions?" "Just one." "Go." "Why?" She smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a business smile, but there was something under it. "Because in 20 years of doing this, Marlo, I have never seen a technical demo that clean from someone your age. Because I called a contact at the Non-Destructive Testing Consortium, and he told me that Alina Marchetti does not sponsor students unless she thinks they are going to change the field. And because I looked up your father, Callum Prescott, and I read the trade press articles from 2019 when Prescott Precision won the Innovation Award for medical grade sensor housings. And I know exactly what your family sold. and I have a pretty good guess about what they did not know they were selling. I stared at her. You looked all that up. Marlo, I am investing in you. I look everything up. Then you know. I know enough. And Marlo, I am going to give you one piece of advice, free of charge. When the day comes, and it is coming, when Marnell Holdings realizes what they bought and did not buy, do not talk to them alone. You call me, you call Robert, you call Alina, you do not sit in a room with them by yourself. You understand. I nodded, I understood. The company was quietly incorporated on July 1st, 2026, in Delaware. It was called Callum Optics. I had thought about the name for a long time. I had settled on it in June, on the anniversary of my father's death, sitting on the floor of my dorm room with a picture of him in my lap. The first product would be the Aperture module, refined and productionized. The first customers, if everything went right, would be Tier 2 aerospace suppliers who could not afford the big legacy systems. I did not tell my family any of this. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my brothers. I did not tell Bennett. I did not tell anyone in Asheville except Priya, Hollies, Marvin, and Sable. 4 people, 4 sealed lips. Meanwhile, 400 miles south, in a plant in Fletcher, North Carolina, Corrine Haveston and her Marnell team were in the middle of what they would later describe in a deposition as the most frustrating post-acquisition integration of her career. Because their new company, the one they had bought from my family for $18 million, was underperforming on every projection. And they could not, for the life of them, figure out why. Marnell Holdings had bought Prescott Precision on the theory that the company's core sensor housings business had a defensible technical moat. That moat, according to the diligence report, was the R&D pipeline. Specifically, a rumored next-generation inspection module that Callum Prescott had been developing before his death. The diligence report had been assembled in February of 2025. It cited 3 sources for the rumor. One was a customer at a medical device company in Raleigh who mentioned that Callum had told him something exciting was coming. Another was a supplier who had noted increased purchases of specific optical components. The third was Grayson Prescott, my brother, who during the sale process had told the buyers, and I am quoting from the deposition transcript I would later read, "Yeah, Dad was working on something big. Some kind of new sensor. Should be in the pipeline somewhere." The buyers had priced that pipeline into the deal. Not explicitly. There was no line item on the purchase price allocation labeled Hidden Invention. But there was a $2.4 million bump in the goodwill category, and internal emails at Marnell, later disclosed in litigation, referred to that bump as R&D upside. They had assumed, in other words, that when they took possession of the R&D lab, they would find the invention. They did not find the invention. They tore that lab apart in the summer and fall of 2025. They interviewed every engineer. They audited every file. They pulled every hard drive. Priya, who had stayed on as head of R&D through a transition agreement, played dumb in the way only a very smart person can play dumb. She showed them the projects on the books. She showed them the housing designs. She showed them the calibration work. She fielded their increasingly frustrated questions with patient, professional composure. Priya, Callum told a customer something big was coming. What was it? Callum told a lot of customers a lot of things. He was a salesman as much as he was an engineer. I cannot tell you what he meant by that specific comment. Was there any next-generation sensor in development? There were multiple product improvements in development. All of them are documented in the files I have provided. Was anyone else developing something, off the books, personal projects, anything? Not that I am aware of, in my role as head of R&D. That answer was, technically, true. In her role as head of R&D, she was not aware of it. She was aware of it as a personal friend of the Prescott family. That was a different role, and she had not been asked about it in that role. Priya quit Marnell in October of 2025. She took a job with a competitor in Charlotte. She was very careful in her exit not to say anything that would breach her transition agreement. Meanwhile, the bearded man from R&D at Marnell, whose name was Douglas Prendergast, was becoming obsessed with the question of what was missing. He was 56, an experienced M and an engineer, and he did not like being fooled. He started reading every document in the diligence file. He started calling old employees. He called Dennis Yao, who had retired in September, rather than continue under new ownership. Dennis politely told Douglas that he had no idea what he was talking about. Douglas called Hollis Ford. Hollis was 71 and had retired from the plant in 2019. Hollis, when asked about any personal projects at the plant, delivered what I understand was a masterful 2-minute monologue about how young people these days do not understand hard work and how in his day machinists actually knew what a caliper was for, and Douglas eventually gave up and thanked him and hung up. Hollis called me that night. He was cackling. "Girl, that boy was fishing so hard I could hear the line." "What did you tell him, Mr. Ford?" "I told him about calipers, honey. I told him about calipers for 2 straight minutes." I laughed until I could not breathe. The breakthrough for Marnell came in April of 2026, and it did not come from Douglas Prendergast. It came from a trade publication. Professor Marchetti had allowed me to present at the Non-Destructive Testing Consortium in Cambridge on April 12th. It was a closed session. Invitation only, roughly 90 attendees, no press. But one attendee, an engineer from a mid-sized aerospace parts manufacturer in Ohio, wrote a short LinkedIn post afterward that mentioned an impressive presentation on high-resolution microfracture detection from a promising undergraduate researcher at MIT. He did not name me. He did not name the technology, but he wrote 3 sentences that included the phrase aperture module and the phrase 40 times resolution improvement. Douglas Prendergast had a Google alert set for the phrase 40 times resolution improvement. It had been running since December. He clicked the LinkedIn post at 9:47 on the morning of April 15, 2026. He read it 3 times. He then went into his colleague's office, closed the door, and made a phone call to Corrine Haveston. Corrine emailed me at 2:11 that afternoon. The subject line was reconnecting. The body of the email was short and professional. She wrote that she had followed my progress at MIT with interest, that she would love to catch up, and that she was going to be in Boston the following week for other business and would appreciate 30 minutes of my time. She suggested coffee at a hotel near the Charles River. I read the email 3 times, then I forwarded it to Adiz, to Robert Klainsesser, and to Professor Marchetti. My subject line was, "It is time." Adiz called me within 20 minutes. "Do not respond yet. Do not respond alone. We are going to draft the response together. And Marlo, listen to me. This is where you get to decide what you want. Do you want money? Do you want an apology? Do you want a fight? Do you want a settlement? Do you want to burn the place down? There is no wrong answer, but you need to know what you want before you write back." I sat with the question for a full day. What did I want? I did not want money for its own sake. I already had a company. I had $250,000 in the bank from Adiz investment. I had projections that suggested Callum Optics could be worth many multiples of what Marnell had paid for Prescott Precision within 5 years. I did not want an apology from Marnell. They had done nothing to me directly. They had been misled, but they had also been careless. They had failed to do the diligence that would have found the truth. That was on them. I wanted 3 things. I wanted my father's name back on something that mattered, not the housing business, that was Marnell's now, but something that carried the Prescott mark. Callum Optics did that. That was already handled. I wanted my family to know what they had done. Not for revenge, exactly, though I will not pretend there was no revenge in it, but for the record. For the moment when my mother, Bennett, Grayson, and Tate would each have to sit with the reality of what they had waved away when they had called me too young to understand business. And I wanted Marnell to buy me out of my father's shadow. Not to buy Callum Optics. Not for any price, but to acknowledge, on paper, that they had bought Prescott Precision without the crown jewel, and that the crown jewel had never been theirs to buy, and that they had no claim on the technology they had missed. I wanted them to sign a document that said that, and I wanted a copy of that document to reach my family's mailbox. Adiz listened to my 3 items. She did not interrupt. When I was done, she was quiet for a long moment. "Marlo, that is a very mature list." "Thank you. I want to make one addition. When we sit down with Karine, I want us to also require that Marnell not pursue any claim against you, your advisors, or Callum Optics related to the Aperture technology. A full mutual release. That protects you. Yes, do that. And Marlo, one more thing, your family, when they find out, it is going to be ugly. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it. I thought about the kitchen. I thought about Bennett's voice on the speakerphone. I thought about the way my mother had told me I was really not sad after graduation, and how she had walked away without asking why I had said that so clearly. I have been prepared for that since I was 17 years and 362 days old at ease. All right then. She helped me draft the response to Karine. It was polite. It was measured. It suggested that a conversation would be productive, that I would be happy to meet, and that I would prefer to have my legal counsel present. I sent it at 9 that night. I closed my laptop. I went for a walk along the Charles. The water was black and the lights of Boston were on the far side, and I stood there and I thought about my father, and I thought about the workbench, and I thought about the tote bag I had carried out of Prescott Precision on graduation day, and I thought, quietly, in the direction of the sky, we are almost there, Dad. The meeting with Karine Haveston happened on April 23, 2026, in a conference room at Adi's office in Kendall Square. Karine came with two people. A general counsel for Marnell named James Petrocelli, and Douglas Prendergast, whose beard had grown in the 14 months since I had last seen him, and who could not stop staring at me like I was a puzzle he was still trying to solve. I came with Adi's, Robert Klainsesser, and Professor Marchetti, who had insisted on being there in her capacity as scientific advisor. I wore a black blazer over a white shirt. I was 19 years old. I looked, according to Sable, who I texted with a selfie beforehand, like I was chairing the Federal Reserve. The meeting was scheduled for 1 hour. It went for 4. Karine opened. She was smooth and professional, and she did not waste time. Marlo, I will be direct. We have reason to believe that a technology developed at Prescott Precision during your father's tenure was not disclosed to us in the sale. We would like to discuss that. You bought Prescott Precision, Karine. You did not buy anything I built. She paused. She glanced at Petrocelli. Can you elaborate? Robert Klainsesser took over. He walked them through the timeline. He walked them through the affidavits. He walked them through the provisional patent, which he handed across the table in a folder. He walked them through the fact that I had been an unpaid intern with no IP assignment agreement, that the components used had been formally written off, that the work had been done on personal time, and that the invention date documented in the patent filing predated the sale of Prescott Precision by more than 2 years. Petrocelli read the patent for 11 minutes. His face did not change. When he was done, he set the folder down. You have this well documented. We have this documented in a way that will survive litigation, if litigation is what you want, Robert replied. Karine held up a hand. Litigation is not what we want. Marlo, let me try again. We have invested significantly in Prescott Precision. We were told by multiple parties that there was a technology in development. We priced that into our offer. That technology, we now believe, is what you are calling Aperture. We would like to understand what a resolution looks like. I spoke for the first time. Karine, my father developed the sensor housings business. That business, in its state on the day of sale, is what you bought. Every asset on the books, every patent on file, every product in the catalog. You got all of it. What you did not get, and what was never yours to get, is a personal project that I developed during high school on my own time. I understand that your diligence assumed something would be there. That assumption was on you. It was not on my family, because my family did not know what I was building. And it was not on me, because I was not a party to the sale in any meaningful sense. I was a minor beneficiary, whose signature was obtained under circumstances that, if we wanted to litigate, would raise serious fiduciary questions. I paused. Karine's eyes had narrowed slightly at the phrase serious fiduciary questions. But I do not want to litigate. I want to move on. What I need from you is 3 things. A full mutual release in writing from Marnell Holdings, releasing me, my advisors, my company Callum Optics, and any of my agents or successors from any claim, current or future, related to the Aperture technology. A written acknowledgement, executed by Marnell, confirming that the Aperture technology was not among the assets sold by Prescott Precision Instruments to Marnell Holdings on May 2, 2025. And a copy of that acknowledgement sent, by certified mail, to the trust address on file for the Prescott family, care of Denise Prescott and Bennett Halloran. Karine blinked. "You want us to send it to your family?" "Yes." "May I ask why?" "You may not, Karine. That is a personal matter." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at Petrocelli. He shrugged, almost imperceptibly. "I need to consult," she muttered. "Take the room next door. We will wait." They took the room next door. They took 45 minutes. When they came back, Karine sat down and folded her hands. "We will do all three, on one condition." "Go on." "We would like right of first negotiation on any acquisition offer for Callum Optics for the next 36 months. Not right of first refusal. Just right of first negotiation. If you decide to sell, you talk to us first." Adiz leaned toward me. She whispered, "That is fair. It costs you nothing. It gives them a face-saving win." I nodded. "Deal." We shook hands across the table. It was 3:57 in the afternoon. Documents were drafted over the next 2 weeks. On May 7, 2026, exactly 1 year and 5 days after my family had sold Prescott Precision, Marnell Holdings executed the mutual release and the acknowledgement. 2 copies of the acknowledgement were placed in envelopes. One was mailed by certified mail to my mother's house in Asheville. The other was mailed to Bennett Halloran at his address in Weaverville. Both envelopes were postmarked May 9, 2026. They would arrive on Monday, May 11th. I flew home for the summer on May 10th. I did not tell my mother when I was arriving. She thought I was coming on the 15th. I stayed at Sable's house for the first night. At 2:30 on Monday afternoon, May 11th, my mother called me. I was sitting at Sable's kitchen table, drinking coffee. Sable's mother was baking bread. Sable was pretending to read a magazine but actually watching me. I let the phone ring 3 times before I picked up. "Hi, Mom." "Marlo, I got something in the mail today. I do not understand what I am reading. Can you come home? Can you come home right now?" Her voice was strange. It was tight and thin, and I could not tell if she was angry or terrified or both. "I am at Sable's. I will be there in 20 minutes. Just come home, please, just come." She hung up. Sable looked at me, her mother looked at me. I set the phone down. "Is it happening?" Sable whispered. "It is happening." I drove to my mother's house, the house my father had built. I parked the Volvo in the driveway. Grayson's Porsche was there, dusty and looking older than it had a year ago. Tate's truck was there. Bennett's SUV was there. My mother had called them all. I sat in the driveway for 1 full minute before I got out. I looked at the front door. I thought about my father. I thought about the wall in the hallway where I had put my hand on the day I had overheard the kitchen conversation, back in January of 2025. Then I got out and I walked up the front steps, and I opened the front door, and I walked into a room where 4 people were waiting for me, and my mother was holding a piece of paper, and Bennett was pacing, and Grayson was standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed, and Tate was on the couch with his mouth actually open. My mother lifted the paper. Her hand was shaking. "Marlo, what is this? What did you do?" I closed the door behind me. I walked to the middle of the room. I looked at each of them in turn. "Mom, sit down. I am going to explain." My mother did not sit down. She stayed standing, holding the piece of paper, and Bennett stopped pacing and turned to face me, and Grayson uncrossed his arms, and Tate closed his mouth. I looked at the paper in my mother's hand. I could see the Marnell letterhead. I could see Karine's signature. "Where did you get that letter, Mom?" "It came in the mail." Bennett got the same one. "Marlo, what is this? It says that when they bought your father's company, there was a technology that was not part of the sale. It says the technology was developed by you. It says you own it. Marlo, what is this?" I took a breath. "I built something, Mom. I built it in the R&D lab at the plant, between 2023 and 2024 on my own time. It is a sensor system. It detects microfractures in machined parts. It is very good. It is better than anything Prescott Precision was selling. Dad knew I was working on it. He supported me working on it. It was not part of the company assets. It was mine. And when you sold the company, Mom, you sold the company, but you did not sell my invention. And Marnell has now acknowledged that in writing. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Grayson laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was the sound he made when he was scared and trying to hide it. Wait, wait, wait. You are telling us, that you built some kind of invention in our dad's lab, and you did not tell us. And now some company in Boston, or wherever, thinks you own it. I do own it, Grayson. It is patented in my name. It has been for 6 months. 6 months. December, provisional patent. Non-provisional filed in March. Bennett cleared his throat. He was trying to reassert control of the room. It was a familiar move. I had watched him do it at Sunday dinners my whole life. Marlo, sweetheart, let us slow down. If you develop something on your father's property, using your father's equipment, then legally that would probably be considered a work made for the company. Your dad ran a business. Anything invented at that business belongs to. Uncle Bennett, stop. He stopped. It was the first time I had ever cut him off. He blinked at me. I was not an employee. I was an unpaid intern with no IP assignment. Priya has already provided an affidavit confirming that. The components I used were written off as scrap by the accounting department in 2023. I have the right off records. The invention was documented in a personal lab notebook that was kept in a personal workbench that Dad had explicitly designated as personal property. Dennis Yao, the plant manager, confirmed that designation to your Marnell buyers in April of 2025 during their walkthrough. There is a transcript of that conversation in the diligence file. Marnell already litigated this in their own heads for a full month before they signed the release. Their general counsel, a man named James Petrocelli, personally reviewed every document. If they thought they had a claim, they would have made it. They do not have one, and neither do you. Bennett's mouth opened, it closed, it opened again. You planned this. Yes. You knew, when we sold the company, you knew you had this, and you did not tell us. Correct. Marlo, that is fraud, that is. No, Uncle Bennett, it is not, because I did not owe you or Marnell any disclosure. The aperture technology was not an asset of Prescott Precision Instruments. It never was. I did not misrepresent anything. I did not sign any document that said I was disclosing everything I knew about company assets. Nobody asked me, and even if they had asked me, I was 17. I was a minor. I had no fiduciary duty. You did, Mom did. Grayson and Tate did because they took direct board seats after Dad died. You 3 did the diligence. You 3 signed the reps and warranties. If Marnell had a claim, it would be against you, not me. Grayson sat down, hard, on the couch next to Tate. Tate had still not spoken. My mother sank into the armchair. She was still holding the letter. She was staring at it now instead of at me. How much? Grayson muttered. How much what? How much is it worth? Your thing, your invention. I looked at him. Grayson, it does not matter. Just tell me, ballpark, come on, how much? I raised $250,000 in seed funding last summer. Callum Optics, the company I incorporated, was valued at approximately $8 million in that round. My equity stake is 65%. We are on track to close a Series A this fall at a valuation between $40 and $60 million. If that closes, my personal stake will be worth somewhere between $26 and $39 million, on paper. If we exit in 5 years at the projections we have modeled, my stake could be worth substantially more. Silence. Tate finally spoke. His voice was hoarse. $26 million. To 39, Tate, on paper, nothing is guaranteed. Grayson put his head in his hands. My mother lifted her eyes from the letter. She looked at me, actually looked at me. I do not think she had looked at me, really looked at me, since sometime in 2024. Marlo, honey, why did you not tell us? I felt something break in my chest, not sadly, cleanly. The way a rope breaks when the weight it was holding was always going to be too much. Mom, do you remember what you said to Bennett on the phone in the kitchen on January 27th, 2025. She went white. I was standing in the hallway. I heard the whole conversation. Bennett told you to sign the papers before I turned 18 because I was a minor and would not know. You said, quote, "But what about Marlowe's share though?" And Bennett said, "We handle it before her birthday. She will not know until it is done. And by then it will be $18 million split 4 ways and she will thank us." And you said okay? Mom, you said okay. My mother put her hand over her mouth. Marlowe. I heard you, Mom. And I decided, standing in that hallway, that I was not going to fight you for the company. Because you would win. You had the votes. You had the guardianship. You had Bennett. But I decided I would take what was mine. Dad had told me one thing about the plant, over and over, my whole life. He told me the most valuable thing in that building was not the machines. It was the ideas. He told me a machine could be replaced overnight. An idea, if it was the right idea, could build a whole new company. He knew what I was working on. He supported me. He protected me. He put clauses in the trust to protect me. He asked Priya and Dennis and Marvin to look after me. He knew, Mom. He knew what you would do. Bennett stepped forward. His face was red. Now hold on, Marlowe. You do not get to. Uncle Bennett, sit down. He sat down, in the chair by the window. He looked at his hands. You called me too young to understand business. That is what you told my mother. That is what you told Grayson and Tate. That is what you told yourselves so you could sleep at night while you cut me out of my father's company. You were wrong. I understood business. I understood it better than any of you. I understood that a company is not machines and buildings. It is what people build inside of it. And I understood something none of you did. I understood that my father was not just a businessman. He was a teacher, and I was the only student he ever really had. I looked at Grayson. Grayson was crying, not making any sound, but tears were running down his face. Grayson, you told the Marnell diligence team that Dad was working on something big. You told them that in February of 2025. That comment was in the diligence report. Marnell priced $2.4 million into the deal based on that comment. Do you know that? He shook his head. You did not do the diligence to find out what you were selling. Neither did Tate. Neither did Bennett. Neither did Mom. You sold something for $18 million and you did not even know what you had. You called me too young to understand business, and then you did not understand the business yourselves. I did, and I walked out with the thing you did not know existed, and now here we are. The room was silent. I sat down for the first time, on the ottoman by my mother's chair. I looked at her. She was still holding the letter. Mom, I love you. I do. I loved Dad more than anyone in this world, and he loved you, and you loved him, and that is going to have to be enough between you and me for a while. But I need you to hear something. You did not protect me last year. Bennett did not protect me. Grayson and Tate did not protect me. Dad did. And so I am going to spend the rest of my life protecting what he built with me. That is who I am. I am not too young to understand that. I never was. My mother cried and held my hand. I let her but did not squeeze back. I stayed at Sable's house in Asheville for 3 weeks. My mother and Grayson called often. I met Grayson at a diner. He had sold his Porsche and admitted he heard everything I said in the living room. He told me Tate blew his money and Bennett was making bad investments. I told Grayson to stay in his lane and stop speaking for the family. He revealed our dad knew I was the one who would build great things. I told Grayson to tell the truth for his own sake. We parted on okay terms. Tate showed up drunk and asked for $100,000. I refused, but offered to pay for 1 round of rehab. He agreed and went to a facility. I spoke to my mother and explained I hid my invention because I did not trust her to stand up to Bennett. She cried and admitted she never saw me the way she saw my brothers. I squeezed her hand back. She promised to try harder. I flew back to Boston. Callum Optics raised $14 million at a valuation of $52 million. My paper stake was worth $33,800,000. I kept the exact numbers secret from my family. The company grew and opened a new center. I took too many college credits, got mono, and had to slow down. I turned 21 and received a framed photo of my dad and me. Bennett filed for bankruptcy, but my mother finally stopped giving him money. We now speak every Sunday. Grayson started a business degree. Tate finished rehab, stayed sober, and got a job. Kareen Haveston and Marnell Holdings never bought Callum Optics. They took their right of first negotiation seriously. They made an offer. It was a good offer. It was for a lot of money. I said no. I said it politely. Adiz said no more politely in the follow-up letter. Kareen understood. She sent me a Christmas card the following year with a handwritten note that said, "You were right to say no. Keep building. Kareen." I keep it in my desk drawer, next to the picture of my father. Marnell rebranded Prescott Precision as Marnell Fletcher Industries in late 2026. The name Prescott is gone from the building. The sign came down in October. I know because Sable's father drove by and sent me a photograph. I looked at the photograph for a long time. Then I closed the phone and I went back to work. My father's name is not on a building anymore. It is on a company that I built. That is the version I can live with. Sometimes at night, when I cannot sleep, I think about the girl I was on January 27, 2025. 17 years old, standing in the hallway of her father's house, listening to her mother agree to sign her out of her own inheritance. I think about the wall that was cold under her hand. I think about the way she walked upstairs without making a sound. I want to tell her something. I know she cannot hear me, but I want to tell her anyway. I want to tell her that being called too young to understand is not a wound. It is a mirror. It shows you who is looking at you and refusing to see. And once you know who those people are, you can stop trying to convince them, and you can start building the life they said you could not build. I want to tell her that her father knew. That he had put people in place to protect her, that he had drafted clauses she did not know existed, that he had left her the workbench and the tools and the permission to make something of her own. I want to tell her that the family who erased her from a piece of paper cannot erase her from her own life. That names on documents matter, but names on inventions matter more. That a signature can be forged, but a working prototype cannot. I want to tell her that she is going to walk out of that plant on graduation day with everything that actually matters in a canvas tote bag from an open house, and that 11 months later, a woman in a black suit is going to email her from a hotel in Boston, and that she is going to be ready. I want to tell her, most of all, that boundaries are not walls. They are the doors you get to lock from the inside so you can decide who you let in. That family is not defined by blood. It is defined by who protects you when protecting you is inconvenient. That self-worth is not something anyone else can hand you. It is something you build the way an engineer builds a sensor. Piece by piece, on your own time, with scrap parts if you have to, until it works. I want to tell her that she is going to be okay. She is going to be more than okay. If you have ever been told you were too young, too small, too quiet, or too anything to deserve what was already yours, I want you to know that people who need to shrink you are telling you something about themselves, not about you. The pieces of your life that matter most are not the ones anyone else can sign away on a Tuesday, in blue ink, 3 days before your birthday. They are the ones you build in the corners of rooms where no one is watching, on nights when no one thinks you are working, with the tools someone who loved you left behind. Keep building, keep the notebook, keep the workbench. Do not let anyone tell you what you are too young to understand. And if this story reached you today, if any piece of it felt familiar, please give it a like. Subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can find you, and share your own story in the comments below. I read them. I really do. Every family has a hallway. Every hallway has a wall.